let me start with what has to stay in place. It is imperative, we believe, at the National Council of La Raza, and have many, many coalition partners in this effort. It's imperative that we not water down the accountability for English language learners, that we not exempt them from testing for 3 years, that we not say, oh, it's okay for them to take 5 years to graduate. It is imperative that we keep the standards high for this group. So let's start with that. Let's start what we don't change. And let's look at some of the things that we do want to tweak and to consider as we move forward. First of all, it is very, very important to do a very simple thing, and that is have the right people at the table. I have found long, long ago in my long education career that if you're not at the table, you don't have a voice. And too many school districts, too many states, too many federal laws have been passed that create instructional changes, that create accountability changes, and after they're put in place, we go, oh yeah, and how about those English language learners? What are we going to do about them? Oh, this test doesn't work for them. Oh, maybe this curriculum doesn't work. Oh, maybe our teachers don't know what to do. All of that coming from not considering these needs up front rather than as an afterthought. So that would be the very, very first strategy that needs to be implemented. Make sure the right people are at the table. That means when you're looking at teacher training, that means when you're looking at accountability, that means when you're looking at instruction and curriculum. Make sure that any legislation that's passed recognizes the needs of English language learners and incorporates those needs into what the outcome is going to be of that piece of legislation. A second thing is a very simple thing. Again, if you've been educating English language learners all your life, it's not so simple a concept if you haven't been working with them. And lots of people in this country, despite the tremendous growth, have not worked with English language learners. And that is to recognize the diversity in the population. One of the biggest excuses we hear for not testing English language learners is, it's so unfair. They just got here yesterday and you're going to put a test in front of them tomorrow. That's not really the case. And if you look at high school English language learners, about a third of them were born in this country. Why are they still English language learners? They're still English language learners because of the poor education they've received. They are still English language learners not because they don't speak English. They're English language learners because they don't have sufficient academic English to pass the achievement test. So there's no excuse for that group. A second group of students came here quite young and have been in our school system many, many years before they get to high school. There's no excuse for that group not doing as well as others. There's no excuse for that group not being held to the same standards, and there's no excuse for that group of students not being held to, not participating in our accountability systems. There is a small group of students that arrives in our high schools late in the school span, that arrives in 10th grade or 9th grade even. Many of those students are students who were did not have formal schooling or were undereducated in their home country. And that's the group everybody pins on. Oh, these poor kids, English language learners, can't be taught because they just got here and they can't even read in their own language. That proportion of our English language learners in high school is quite small, actually. It's about, on average, if you look across this country, it's an average is about 10 to 12%. You do see higher proportions within certain localities, and it is true that we have to take some extraordinary steps with those students. But we have seen what extraordinary measures can be taken if you look at the efforts of Claire Sylvan and her colleagues in New York, working with immigrants who just came to this country at age 15, who graduate from high school and go on to college. So we know we can make it work. So let's look at English language learners as what they are, a very diverse population that requires a diverse set of strategies. Third, fourth, where am I? Down the line, the next big strategy is making sure our teachers are prepared to work with English language learners. You know, the whole key to having high standards and rigorous education is having teachers that are prepared to do this. Ruslin's story of having kids not have access to the same college courses as others So you have to go down one micro level and go into schools where the kids do have access to those courses. But when you go into the class, the English language learners are being taught at such a low level because the teachers don't have the skills to know how to teach them at higher levels and still work with them because they're not English language learners. So we need to make major efforts in teacher education and teacher training, teacher retraining to work with these kids. The next thing we need to figure out in our federal legislation is how you incorporate language into assessment and accountability systems. And how you incorporate language doesn't mean doing it all in English. It doesn't mean doing it all in the native language. It's understanding the level of language capacity in each area and using your accountability system to have benchmarks so you understand what kids do know in their native language and then move them very quickly toward English and understand how you assess that as you go and hold them to the same high standards. This is going to take another major strategy, and that is support of development of valid assessments for English language learners and for a whole group of other kids in this country. I think one of the places where we have been weakest in implementing ESEA this last round is in telling states you've got to test these kids and not supporting them and then creating the appropriate assessments. We have a long way to go. There are major legislative steps that can be taken to support school districts, to create the research, to pull together the right coalitions of school districts to work on these assessments. We need a new generation of assessments for all our kids, and we certainly need one for English language learners. And then finally, echoing what Joel talked about, we really need to implement strategies that support English language learners' transition to post-secondary education. They can go on to college. They do go on to college. We've seen it. I said it in the work we see for Sylvan. We've seen it in the work that NCLR has done. English language learners can go to college. There's a whole panoply of different strategies, beginning with working with families to understand what it takes to go to college and families understanding what it takes to hold schools accountable, moving on to the rigor that needs to be implemented in the classroom, and just the preparation and creating that college-going culture. In closing, I can tell you that at NCLR we work with 60 high schools, 10 of which are early college high schools, and we can show the results. The results in those schools are the kids, these are schools that are on average have 40% English language learners. These schools are doing better than the school districts they're in. They're making tremendous gains when they're not doing better. Many of them increasing 10 percentage points a year, which is major. But NCLR working with 60 high schools is not going to cut it. Even if NCLR added another 60 high schools every year for the next 10 years, it's not going to make a difference. The kind of differences we have to make have to be embedded in policy, and they have to be embedded in practice in high schools across this country. And so I would leave you with that challenge, whether you are a congressional staffer and can help us make those changes at the federal policy level, or whether you are a practitioner. We have a major task ahead of us, and I look forward to working with you in that task. Thank you.